Hun, we're good to go. You got those buttons?
Buttons are handled. I only got 2 to push. We're good.
Watch it. I told you.
I hope so. I mean, who knows? This is my first time. Yeah, I can mess it all up.
Please don't do it.
We'll see.
But thank you, Hun, for doing this. And thank you, Breck.
I'm not getting paid for this either.
Okay.
I'm not either. No relevant financial disclosures to make.
The best part about this is I'm so going to use that as the first sentence that gets said. Thank you, Hun, for... Thank you, Hun, for doing this. And she was like, I'm not getting paid for this, you know? Like, all right. But Breck, thank you for coming. I know it took a while because you were in here with Ray like a month ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right about that.
But I knew that we were at the fundraiser, and I'm like, yeah, we have to get in here because I still have all these notes. But I wanted to get into your background because they had gave you a little bit of time, and I was like, I want to know more than just that. So the leading question was, what do you do exactly? How'd you get into it? And then why was this the choice, like the career move for you?
Okay. Well, I knew from when I was really little that I was going to be a doctor. My dad was a doctor. Grandfather was a doctor. That was just where I was going to go. And then I ran into math and realized very quickly that I was not going to be a doctor. Math is not my friend, never has been. So kind of tabled that for a while. Then I had my first experience with therapy when I was 17. And I found out pretty quick, okay, I'm doing this. I'll be a doctor for your feelings, essentially.
What was the experience as a 17-year-old that?
So my grandfather's suicide kind of kickstarted the just fall off the edge of the cliff for me personally.
Yeah.
Part of why I ended up working in inpatient psych hospitals is because I was a patient there.
Right.
I was inpatient for almost a year. So, there's a familiarity there.
Right.
The sort of running joke I had was that if I'm never going to get away from mental health, I might as well get really good at it.
Yeah, that's so true.
I'm going to be stuck in my head the rest of my life. I might as well learn what it's like in there.
Yeah, it's like I live here.
Yeah.
And that was something else that also was like, I tell my sister all the time, or Carly will hear me. I'm like, you don't have to worry about everybody else. You just, wow, that is a really good microphone.
Telling you everything I do. You can hear.
You're good.
Yeah, it's not you. It's
the best news is that editing tips, we can get that all out of there. But it's like, the pinnacle moment was like, also, we all have been in situations where that's usually where it starts. Like for me, it was like, suicide for me, depression, anxiety. I had a kid at a young age, all alone. It was all on top. No one taught you how to deal with it. Yep. There's no way to like, oh, we've done that. And it's like, there was no one around. Mm-hmm. So we've definitely been on every side of that coin. But yeah, I was just at this point where it was like, well, it was like risk and take whatever like goal, whatever thing you have in your head, just go ahead and go for it because everybody else doesn't really matter because they weren't there for you anyways. So you might as well go doing something that you want to do. And the second part was that made me feel really, really good when I took that. And I was like, it was still negative. Found MMA, jiu-jitsu, some type of physical activity to embrace that into a positive like self-confidence booster. And that was what I also found when I was digging into some of this research. It's like they have some of the anger and some of the, aggressive behavior, but self-discipline and self-reflection is very different. And being choked out, like Ray says, by a woman half your size will definitely do that to you.
It will. Actually, it's interesting you bring up the anger because that was one of the things that drew me towards psychoanalysis. There is a huge focus on anger. Freud's original belief was that there were two, he called them libidinal forces, so essentially life forces. One was sexuality and the other was aggression. And I mean, keep in mind, this was written by a white male doctor in pre-World War II Vienna.
Got it. So, I'm in there. I'm locked in. I know exactly.
Very narrow idea of what is acceptable. But aggression was, it was one of the driving forces.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at some of the things that you do from that standpoint, it gets a little easier. It gets a little less scary to go, wow, this thing that I love doing, this jiu-jitsu and MMA thing, this is basically ritualized murder. Except it's like consensual and there are rules and we stop short of that. But it seems a little less weird. We need a framework to understand, like, what do we do with this level of aggression? Because there are a lot of other communities that will pathologize this and make it something that is wrong, needs to never be done. It's like, this is still going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, we just need to know what to do with it. And there's been, for clarification, a lot of people think analysis and they think, you know, they just think Freud. There's been a lot of development since then. Well, I mean, you laugh, but like no one criticizes, say, the medical field because Hippocrates used leeches. Like the field's progressed since then. The getting into my own analysis when I was, started when I was 19. I learned pretty quick that would change how I look, not just at myself, other people. It changes how you look at art, how you look at music. I'm not going to go off into the whole, like, this is the way thing, because there is no one way. But there are links between all of these different fields, and it really helps if you understand some analytic theory. You can get a lens for interpreting everything from Salvador Dali's Melting Clocks to international terrorism in the 90s.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
It's not just an analogy. Vamik Volkan was a Nobel laureate who's a psychoanalyst. And the first talk I went to at the Kansas City Psychoanalytic Institute was him talking about trying to broker some peace treaties in Beirut and in, I think, Yugoslavia, or what it was then, in the Balkans in the 90s. Like,
oh, wow.
There's overlap.
I think it's more of a I never would have guessed type of deal. You know, and then you're like, wait a minute, hold on. And it's like same thing over here. It's like once I started, and I didn't know also that me looking at myself in that lens and like building on it and like really diving in, because it's actually terrifying when you have to go into you and be like, okay, what's wrong with me in ways? And then you were like, if you say nothing, you were like, well, that actually is a really big one. But if you're willing to take that leap into it and then progressively, actively work on it over years and years and years, because I was probably 20, 21 when that was like a big deal. And, you know, my sister was still growing. She's 3 years beneath me. So then she watched it, and then now she's doing the same thing herself and is 3 years, I would say, ahead than I was. And I never realized that would influence her that much. And not in a way that's like, I'm your older brother, I'm doing it. She's like, that's actually really brave to pick those apart and then fix them. So
it is. It is, as you said, it's really frightening to look inward. You hit on a couple points that are, I'm not sure if you were really aware of how important these are when you said them. Big part of analytic thought. When we just talk, unconscious thoughts, feelings, behaviors come to the surface. So one of the things you've said right at the beginning was when you dig in and you think like it's hard to look at yourself and go, okay, this is wrong. Well, to know that something is wrong is to know that something's unhealthy implies that we know what is healthy. So to start with this, we have to know what healthy looks like. So many other fields focus on like the pathological and the unhealthy side. It's like, no, we need a picture of what health actually is. But even if it's multifaceted, which it always is, we need a picture of what this can look like before we can start going, that's problematic. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out. I'm not really trying to turn this into a recruitment blurb for analysis. It's just I get very excited about this.
No, you're good. And it's the same comparison with, like, you know, if you believe in absolute evil, then you have to believe that there's an example of absolute good. Like, you have to have something compared to. Like, this is bad. Why is this bad? Because this is really good. And I'm like, okay. So kind of the same coin there. But I didn't realize any of that stuff until like 2 years ago. I didn't know that it was tough. I just knew I didn't want to be who I was then, or who I was, the way I was thinking. And it's like, okay, why am I thinking that way? Like, why is this a negative thing? And then going back, oh, that was an experience that, this was also something terrifying when I dove in, because my sister can recall our childhood and moments that she's like, I remember that moment for you. And I was like, I don't. And she's like, wait a minute, how much of like being a kid do you remember? I go, not a whole lot. I was like, I remember an hour at a museum when we were like 10 in Denver. And she's like, what about like 3rd through 4th grade? No. Like elementary school? Not a whole lot. I got hit by a kid one time in the throat and started choking and felt very, very weak and small. So it's like, I remember like very impactful moments that then I had to deal with, because that's what is driving me. It's like, oh, I want to learn to defend myself. Let's go to MMA. But also, I'm depressed and hate myself. Let's let someone else punch me for once, And so I didn't realize any of that until a couple years ago.
There's a very large amount of masochism when you get into martial arts.
Yeah, I dealt with it. Yeah, I dealt with it yesterday, because it was a boxing sparring round. I was like, I'm just going to go work out. And that ego creeps up. It starts to talk. I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys, I could totally do this with these guys. And they're taking heavy shots. I mean, they're wearing headgear and stuff, but you're still taking shots. And I'm like, oh, I could slip that easy. I'm like, this guy. And I'm like, okay. I was literally having a conversation just like this in the corner. Yep. No. I have headgear in the car. Like, and I noticed people walking like, okay, just walking by like weirdo over here, just sitting by the speaker, talking to nobody. And I'm like, because I know what it does when you get that. It's like an addicting feeling. And it's not necessarily the release of any anger. It's just the like fulfillment of putting in work that I've done. And I could do that stuff, which is the great part. You can still do that and not get hit in the face. You can still do it on the bag and people go, yeah, that's crisp. Like, that's cool. But then it's also like, why am I caring about what they are judging me for in the gym? Why do I feel the need to go in there and prove anything? And start breaking that down. And then I was able to like talk myself down and save myself from a pretty serious concussion, I would have to guess. Because I also don't stop. Like, I also want to be the last one to do it. And then I'm like, well, great. Now I'm concussed. Now I can't do anything for a week. And the last one I did that was like probably 3 years ago, when I'm like really into it. I was doing fine. And then you have someone who's just out of control. And I'm like, well, they are just unorthodox. I'm getting smacked all around. But it's also through guard, but they're just throwing all that they have. And I'm like, nothing went through, but it still moves you. It still hurts.
Yes, it does.
But it is that addicting adrenaline boost. And then as soon as that wears off, and it's usually when I get in the car, I'm like, oh no, we have a problem. And then I get sick, start to throw up, and I'm like, that was not worth it at all. But you don't realize that as I'm going through it. And then I realized that's also part of addictive behavior. So let's fix some of that stuff. And I was able to finally, for the first time, not have to spar and feel good. I went home and I'm like, well, I don't feel sick. So that's nice.
But isn't that a therapeutic thing for you to go and just get all that out?
The workout?
Yeah.
Well, I just really like the idea that, I got into wanting to stay healthy, not because of like any fads or anything, but because I knew that was the one thing, especially when I was depressed and not getting out of bed for 13 hours. I could control that. If everything else I can't control, I can control my workout. I can put my headphones on, I can go in there, and I can at least hit the bag, because regular workout's boring.
I know you touched on aggression a little bit, and I'm just kind of wondering, like, do you think that jiu-jitsu and all of that is a therapeutic thing for aggression, like to get all that stuff out? Is that like reliable, or like, I don't know. I'm kind of wondering about that. I feel like it's
this is a perfect segue.
I know, like,
because she has
Ray's
no idea.
Ray's trying to get it into schools right now, and I think that that's something great. It's a way to get out aggression in a healthy way. Like, do you agree? Do you think it's a therapeutic kind of thing? I'm just kind of bouncing off because my
perfect.
My brain.
That's why I still have my next little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my brain just bounces.
Cool.
That's awesome.
No. I think it's complicated.
Yeah.
Like your example of sparring and just getting blasted even through the guard. that was probably somebody who was relatively new.
Yeah.
I mean, you've done more sparring than I have. You know, you get hurt the most by people that are new,
That are just reckless and have something to prove. Yeah.
yeah, or both.
Yeah.
People who are even trying to figure this out, but don't really have the body control yet to know how to tap you without flattening you. So, I mean, you don't have the striking issue with jiu-jitsu, obviously, but what you do have are people that are, even if, so say they're kids, they don't really know how to use their bodies yet.
Yeah.
It's really hard even for adults to know how much pressure to put on a submission or how hard to squeeze a choke. The difference between applying a submission and cranking it isn't really obvious for people at the beginning. So you're running a high risk of somebody getting hurt. And they will. I mean, we're not doing this to cuddle each other. This hurts. Favorite alternative name for jiu-jitsu is struggle snuggle.
Oh, yes.
It's powerful.
Document that, Chase. That is a t-shirt. That is a t-shirt. And we're going to give it to Breck. Perfect t-shirt.
But there actually was a study in the UAE from, I think, 2018 where they did put jiu-jitsu into schools and with the age groups that Ray's talking about. And they found, I'm a little hazy on their exact conclusions at this point. I referenced it when you and Ray and I'd met.
It hooked me immediately. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. It did work to decrease some conduct issues in school, to help with self-esteem, a little bit of self-worth. Where you really run the risk beyond the physical injury is you get somebody who's had some kind of sexual trauma history. You get somebody who has been in combat, traumatized, something like that. It's really, really activating to have someone trying to keep you from breathing. It triggers most of our survival functions. It's one thing to try to breathe when you're working out. It's something very different to try to breathe when someone's trying to keep you from breathing.
Yeah.
So it has the potential to be really, really helpful for school. But the unfortunate reality, I think, is that the amount of liability involved means it's not going to happen. And I will pitch this as hard as I can, not just because I believe in what Ray's doing and I like him, but also because I think the data is there to support it. I am very skeptical of it working because just how litigious we are and how careful a public school system has to be with kids. As soon as the message gets spread, well, this is how kids get hurt, no one's going to go, yes, let's hurt kids. No, let's support that. No.
Well, I remember now, I don't know if it's still a thing, but I still remember it was a big deal when they removed dodgeball because it was too dangerous. From schools, they don't play dodgeball anymore. I'm like, yeah, I remember my teacher was throwing balls at like 60 miles an hour. And we're third graders like, we missed it.
Builds character.
Yeah. And then I watched Julie get hit in the face. Pow, pow, pow. They were like, well, they're like, shake it off. Come on. Here we go. Come on. You got it. But, I mean, I assume that, well, the important part for me was like two things. First, I have been both on the receiving end of being choked, not being able to breathe. And the one that didn't get me was actually the choke because I had enough trust in the person I'm rolling with. But it was a really good body triangle.
Yep.
And I'm just like, and as that diaphragm, you're like, I don't know what this did. It's literally, as I breathe, it's squeezing like an anaconda, and I really don't know what to do. And it was when I was still new, and I tapped, and they were like, we're not doing anything. And I'm like, I know, the body triangle's tight. I go, I've never felt that before. But then a couple weeks ago, doing it over and over again, and he was really good. It was at one community. He had me in a really good top mount, like Ezekiel choke. And it was good. And I could tell, and couldn't get any air through, but I was like, well, I was able to actually sit there calmly, break down how I'm going to remove the hand, right? Figure it out, and then go to side control and flip, do like a butterfly guard flip. Shoop. And then he asked me after, he goes, was that not good? And I go, it was fantastic. I go, I've just also been there to the point where, rolling with guys and being in positions where I'm actually able to calm down, slow my brain, and do it. And I think that's only by doing this. And so the second one was the liability issue with schools. would it be possible to set up, because it's always about the framework. It's always the situation, the instructor, the partner. And it's like, so you'd have to have someone solid, obviously teaching the class, not the gym teacher throwing balls 65 miles an hour at you, but like someone who actually is like Ray and people who have done it for 10 plus years and can set it up like, hold on, don't crank that. Okay. And again, there's always the risk of offering something of value, but then also the negative side of that. So yeah, you have kids that really love it and they really improve. They get self-confidence. There's less bullying, but then you also have the ones who use it as the weapon to then hurt the other kids. It's always that conflicting issues. But I'm hoping that we can do it because the data did show that they did improve as a group. So I same thing. I really want to push the message as well. And I hope maybe setting up the proper framework and situation and teaching the kids the proper way and making sure that if they do it outside of here or this, that, I don't know, get in trouble, but, assessing that a little better.
Well, so, need to clarify, I am not an attorney. I have no legal training.
No.
But there are, every gym you've gone to, you've had to sign a waiver that says, hey, if I die here, it's not your fault.
If I don't tap and I break my arm, I'm not going to sue you. Yeah.
Yep. So a really clear explanation to the parents of, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. This is why we're doing it. Here are the risks involved.
Yeah.
Are you okay with this? You can set up that UAE program did a group of kids that did a couple hours a week of jiu-jitsu and compared to kids who did regular gym class. You would select your two groups that way, the parents that were okay with this and the parents who were not. The parents who are not, their kids don't have to participate.
Right.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, because I did the same thing with my kiddo, just because I was going, it's 2021. I was going Monday through Friday. I was there MMA class. I was there striking class. Then afterwards was gi or no gi jiu-jitsu. And he was watching me get better. And I like that, because that lesson stuck in. It was like, I'm watching Dad consistently do this. He's getting way better. He used to get choked out by the guy. Now he's actually no submissions are getting landed, and he's actually surviving. That's good. And so I could see that lesson build in him now that he's 9.5. He's going to be 10 in March. And so I wanted that lesson to stick. But I also wasn't going to be the dad to push him in there and be like, you need to do this because I was bullied at your age. Like, that's very negative. And I realized that was not going to be good at all. But if he made the decision to do it, I watched him do it when he was learning to ride his bike. We were like, come on, Madden, you can do it. Encouraging. And he's like, he just didn't make the decision in his head. I watched him Monday. He just goes, I'm going to try it without the training wheels. I go, okay. He got on, started going, a little rocky, and he just was standing up on the bike. And I'm like, okay. So if I do it that way with things that he has interest in, I agree with you. I wouldn't be like, all kids need to wrestle and do this.
No. Because
it didn't work with him either when he saw that. Because he did one class, realized that it wasn't what he wanted to do. He thought it was more of a play, roll around type deal. But it's very disciplined, which is good on the teacher because they were all probably above, 10. So probably like 12. Going into middle school. And I'm like, okay. Very different than the 7-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
And so they need a different level of attention and care. Like, hey, like it was more stern. And so I realized why he wouldn't do it that way. But, I think he'd really like it if he rolled with like Rory at one community. A little more relaxed, different setting. But yeah, I don't know if that's the thing too, but that was something related to, I'm not a PTSD for me or anything trauma-wise, but that was also why a lot of it was, because I got beat up in school.
Mm-hmm.
So then my dad's like, well, you need to learn martial arts. Put me in karate, right? I did very well in karate because I loved it because it was the thing I attached to protect myself. And my dad said, hey, if you do that, you'll be safe. You'll be fine. I'll back you up. Then when it came to actual conflict and they had to have a parent-teacher conference with another kid, he was like, you're aggressive. You need to be removed from it. I'm like, I'm not the aggressive. And it was like, that was a very traumatic thing for me because it was also the disconnect. It's like, well, he's not going to believe me even if I say I did the right thing. And so he just removed me from all aggressive stuff and then doubled down on it. My favorite memory, one of the few that I remember, is then he put me in anger management. So when everyone had reading time, it was me with a room full of kids who had serious problems. And also maybe this is part of going through trauma and PTSD, part of recovery being put in a similar situation, and then like jujitsu would be for sexual trauma.
Not necessarily. There are enough risks to doing that typically that isn't part of any kind of treatment protocol. I think the closest I'm aware of that it gets is graded exposure therapy for a specific phobia. So if somebody has a fear of snakes, you start with like a picture of a snake on a wall and then go until you can tolerate that. And then like a fake snake in the room, go till you can tolerate that. So it's just getting a little closer to the thing you're afraid of. But as far as being exposed to a similar situation, not ideal.
Well, and that's what I thought when I was in a room with people who were very angry a lot of the time and couldn't control it. She made us play board games. And board games only have one winner. Yeah. So I remember constantly playing board games, not even me being the winner. And I'm like, good job, man. And then the other kids flipping the table. And this lady's like, calm down. Everybody relax. And I'm like, what do you think? There's only one winner in the anger management class. But yeah, I still remember that too. So I also want to get into, I know there's no like one size fits all, but also this area of you working as a clinical psychologist in trauma and PTSD.
So that it's an easy mistake to make. It's a common one. I'm not a psychologist.
Got it.
I'm licensed as a social worker. That's what my master's is in, and my clinical licensure. My postmaster's training is in psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis. So that's the word.
I need to be very clear about what I do and don't do.
Perfect. Yeah, no. I also didn't want to make the mistake and be like, this was the guy.
In all fairness, some of us just really don't know what that means. So it's really easy to get confused. Yeah. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Which part?
All of it, I guess. I mean, I don't know very much about any of that.
So there are 3 traditional grad programs that allow you to do mental health treatment. There's social work, there's counseling psychology, and there's psychology. Psychology is the one that everybody knows. It's more focused on psychometry, so psych testing, training. It's traditionally known as the more academically rigorous side. Counseling psych is aimed mostly at school psych. So school counseling is kind of its wheelhouse. Social work, I kind of refer to it as being a jackass of all trades. There are social workers like me in private practice. There are social workers that do school counseling. There are also social workers that do, like, I've been wanting Ray to see if we can find an administrative social worker because it seems like one community really needs somebody to do a lot of grant writing, like community organizing. Like, these are things that social workers do as well. So it's very broad, not super deep. And then psychoanalysis is kind of the opposite. It's really, really deep. It's not super broad. And I kind of did that on purpose. I knew I wanted to be an analyst. And so I knew it was going to be a very deep field that there are analysts who would really contest this, but a deep field that doesn't work very broadly. So I thought I'd get a master's that was very broad, but not super deep. Analysis was the original form of talk therapy. A lot of what we have now in the US is guided heavily by insurance protocol. It's also a huge backlash against analysis. So, because nobody really wants to hear, hey, Chase, you've talked about trauma. If this is something that you want to work on, I can help you with this. Probably. I can't guarantee anything, but it's going to be a lot of really hard work. It's going to be roughly 3 to 5 times a week, and it's going to go, I don't know how many years. On average, 5 to 7. Oh, and I don't take insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that
Yeah.
when you can be told by people that are supposed to know that you can do the same thing in once a week for 16 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's
Agreed.
covered by your insurance. So
I think it's a different mental headspace because that's exactly what like my cognitive behavioral therapy was like.
mm-hmm.
He was like, I go, why don't you do insurance if you don't mind me asking? He goes, well, I also want to make sure that you're willing to actually do the work, because he's like, if you're willing to pay this amount, like every week, then I know you're willing to come here, go through this hard stuff we have to go through, and then literally work on it. And it means more than just like, it's this much insurance. It's no big deal, and you don't have to take it as serious. And I'm like, ooh, very nice. That's a very good thing. And I go, I guess that's why you're good at your job. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, therapy is an investment. No matter which kind of therapy you're doing, it has to be an investment. There were a lot of low-fee clinics. For what Freud's final dream for what analysis looked like was community psychoanalysis, low fee or free, just available in the community. And one of the reasons that failed is because people that weren't paying for it didn't take it very seriously.
Yeah.
And everyone fucking hates to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone hates to hear that, but it's true. If it's not something we're investing in, we're probably not going to take it as seriously.
Yeah. It's also the same thing about, on the individual. It's like, if I was me at that age and had to break the way that I broke and hit bottom, and it was like there was two ways. It's like I can fix it, I can look at me, and I can do the really scary hard thing, and some type of, I don't know if it's because it was so physical, but something that was easy, like jujitsu. And by easy, I mean you have to just go in and then listen and then do the thing. And then eventually, as you keep doing that thing, you'll get 1% better that day, or like 10% maybe. You're like getting better incrementally, and you can see that visually. Mm-hmm. For me as a visual learner, I think that really pushed me to be willing to even look deeper, look harder, and then take it more serious. And other people would just shove that thing back down and try to ignore it and keep going. And I'm like, it's harder that way. It's hard both ways. One is hard right away. You have to do it, you have to look at it, and you have to be dedicated to fixing it. The other one is like you can ignore it, and it gets a little bit because you have the things coming back, the memory coming back, the trauma coming back, but then you have to constantly ignore it. And it's like, I'd rather work on it than just keep doing that. That seems like more work. But I really do think that some type of physical thing that I could see progressing helped that. And I wanted to get into that with your dissertation.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
Well, for what my dissertation is, I don't know if it's going to be very helpful. I'm writing about a 20th century British mystery novelist named Dorothy Sayers.
Okay.
So it probably won't be too helpful for jiu-jitsu. I think I may have confused you, though, because it was my original idea was to do study people with late stage sexual trauma recovery that were doing jiu-jitsu, preferably women, because the size difference, the likelihood of trauma, all of that. And from that regard, I can see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Again, we have to look at what's safe for people. That dissertation got shot down instantly because my chair looked at me. He was pretty nice about it, but he was like, so this whole thing we have about not harming our participants.
Yeah.
You want to take somebody who has already suffered really serious trauma, and you want to probably re-expose them to a version of that while almost guaranteeing that they're going to get hurt physically. And I kind of went, well, when you put it that way.
Yeah.
Gotta take things so literally these days. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, I was like, damn, I'll work with a fictional character instead.
Yeah. But I mean, but if the thing that was, I think, bugging me with that is that, but if the data says that it does improve, then are you, I don't know. I'd feel like I'd be letting people down if this was helpful in some way. And I'm like, I could work with you through that.
Here's the thing. Yes, the data shows that on average, students do improve. In this setting. It was students. But there are a number of things you have to look at with studies. One of them is called mortality, and it's who stays to the end of the study and who drops out. Well, obviously the people that drop out, you don't hear their experiences at the end. So their experience, their data isn't counted.
Yeah.
So you
I got
only
it.
hear from the people that finished. And I mean, one of the things we have to look at in mental health is we're trying to find the people that fell through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that's a big part of how they got where they are.
Yeah.
So, we can't go, if the majority of people do pretty well with this, then it's good. It's, if this is going to harm the people you're working with,
Yeah.
you can't do it.
Is there any way to, like, I almost said hit them up. Is there any way to ask them after if they dropped out? Like, actually be like, I have the names for the people who want to participate. These are the ones that dropped out. Do you just let them go? And
It's part of the agreement you make when they agree to be part of a study.
got it.
That they can drop out at any time. They will not, if they choose to do that, we're not going to try to track them down. They're not going to have any sort of negative impacts from that. It's their choice. And part of why martial arts was effective for you is because it is your choice to do that. The only way we get good data and the only way that we treat people respectfully is to make it their choice.
Right.
And then
Agreed.
stick to that.
I agree. It's just that, I don't know. Now, I don't even know the people. I don't know the study. I don't know what it's called. But I'm also like, well, I want to hear what it was. Because if it was, I mean, it also is deeply personal if you're a student and you're like, someone sexually assaulted me close to my family. That's hard to say at, any age. And so I get that completely. I just thought the idea was great, even if it worked. But again, let's say the female who's doing jiu-jitsu had to first go to the gym and be like, this is what I'm going to do because this happened. And I just don't know. The idea of me was very similar in, like, at the beginning, that was my trauma. The person doing this thing was it. They might have won this time, but it won't win in 2 months, And so that, not saying that out loud, that kind of sounds a little messed up. But because they're great people.
Yeah.
It's just that I went into a space that allowed to do that, which I think really exponentially, like, made my growth so quick compared to people who started at the same time. And I was like, I have a very different motivational factor than I think you guys do. You're here to learn how to do some cool wrestling moves, and I'm here to, like, beat this thing. So I do see that. I had a question about PTSD, and I totally gapped it. But the other thing I got was the paper here. I'm going to pull my laptop up.
Yeah, sure.
Breck, if you want to move your mic down just a tad, just to see your face a little bit better.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, hon.
Right there. Yep. Looks good.
Yeah.
But
Thanks
I
for letting me
will
know.
link this article underneath. I saved the link and everything. But it's titled Benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Managing Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. A study by, it says, Kelly Weinberger and Tracy Bureston. I think that's how you say it. But it's about veterans with PTSD and how this helped them recover from that by the somatic. What was it? Somatic?
Somatic psychotherapy is what they called it.
And what was that again?
So the soma is your body. So psychotherapy is mind therapy. Soma is body.
So is a way to use both together?
That's a lot of their point, is the ability to integrate mind and body function had a pretty big role in the results they got.
I would say also personally, I think that's what did it there. I was like, I struggle in the mind, struggle in the body, image of small. I mean, I'm 148. I'm 148 pounds. And you could literally pick me up the same way you'd be like this. Oh, you're like a bird. You have, like, really light bones. And they would just pick me up, throw me around. And I'm like, so it was very easy for me to be like, wow, you can just show off to lady friend over there if you just go pick up Chase and throw him to the locker. And it's like, I always imagine, like, in my head, this comedy thing where it's like all these, they're like, who could I, like, really demonstrate? They were like, oh, totally. Like, one time I accidentally, like, moved Chase and he, like, just went right into the locker, and it's just, so it was a thing for me. But PTSD with veterans was really big for my uncle because he went to Afghanistan. And, I was probably my kid's age when he left. And I remember happy, fun, goofy, the uncle he's now because he's recovered and gone through it. And my goodness, I think he has 5 kids now. but he met his wife, moved a couple hours away, so I don't see him very often. But I do remember being really small. He's gone a year, maybe 2, comes back, and he's a whole different human. I never see him, very reclusive, no jokes ever. And then you come to find out that, he was in his unit and he had to come home because he got 2 Purple Hearts. And so he's in the Humvee, other people in Humvee. And again, I don't know if this is exactly true, but this is the story that I got when I asked the question, why is Uncle different? And apparently they went over to IED, and then everybody else in the RV, they didn't make it, but he somehow flew out either the side or the back and was like hit something, was knocked unconscious, and was just there. And luckily one of his friends was like, I saw that, and they all pulled over. And then they're in a gunfight, but he's like, I know Matt's still over there. He's knocked out. He got shrapnel all through his head. I mean, he has terrible brain scans as well from just concussive trauma over there. And luckily grabbed him, pulled him to safety. And then that was the first one. And then he got a second one for one that I'm not really familiar with because I was older, and they were like, I don't think we want you to hear that one. I go, okay. And so having that experience with that and seeing it and how hard it is to work, and he has to wear special glasses, like these yellow light glasses, for intense migraines that, I mean, you used to go to the ER like every week for, because it was just insane. And so it was a lot of work, and probably when I was at the middle or end of high school, like when my kiddo got here, it was like, okay, Uncle's back. Like it took a long period of time between there. But I just took the little snippet from it because I thought it was very interesting. But it says the longevity of the United States armed conflicts has resulted in a substantial portion of military personnel being at risk for post-traumatic stress disorder. Fewer than half of the veterans needing mental health services receive treatment for their PTSD. And for those who do receive treatment, less than 1/3 are receiving evidence-based care. Additionally, 1/3 of first responders also develop PTSD. The participants in this report report that the therapeutic benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practice, including assertiveness, self-control, self-confidence, patience, empathy, empowerment, and improved sleep, which many do not get, along with mindfulness, especially in community settings like Jiu-Jitsu, were very beneficial. And I thought that it was sorry, it's on the world's largest piece of paper. But I really liked that was 2021 when this was written. And I would assume that since this has come out, I started just basic Googling on my lunch break, how many more people have attempted or tried this or done something that was related to how your dissertation piece was. And I'm like, if this is something that you can combine the mind and the body and actually have progress and improvement, I think that's a plus.
It's a huge plus. Hang on, I'm finding something here that's real familiar.
Oh, you're good.
So that's really interesting. So one of the things that they talk about here under the benefits, they mentioned managing aggression, and they mentioned sublimation. Sublimation is, so the way I teach this when I taught defense mechanisms, the way I teach it is, okay, there are certain people in, say, government that I would like to hit in the head with a brick.
Yeah.
But I can't do that for various reasons. So that's the aggressive impulse. I want to hit them with a brick, but I can't do that for various reasons. Laws, mores, norms, plane tickets are expensive. Prison orange is not my color. Like there are reasons I can't do this. So that's blocked by the superego, the part of your mind that says, okay, I know you want this, but you can't because here. But that impulse is still there. So what do we do with that? Well, sublimation is when you go, okay, I can't hit them with a brick, but I can hit a punching bag. So we take an antisocial behavior, like in this case, assault and battery, and change it into something that is socially acceptable. Well, the participants in there are talking about using jiu-jitsu to sublimate really aggressive tendencies that keep them alive in war, but really tend to backfire in civilian society.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got really distracted by that because
Yeah.
it was kind of exciting. The stuff you're talking about with your uncle, a lot of what it's really hard to talk about this when you have a personal connection to it.
Yeah.
Because there is such a strong want for this to work.
Yeah. And that's also being biased and going into these and being like, oh, you're already biased going into something that's supposed to be the solution, but it taints the whole study. Yeah.
I told my dissertation chair with the jiu-jitsu and trauma thing, I was like, I know this can work. And he just went, and that's why you can't do it.
Yeah.
I was like, God damn it. Why did I say that?
I actually find that very interesting because I'm trying to, because at least for me, I'm emotionally tied to things that are important. So that pull is very, very strong. And in other ways, some people can just not have that. And I'm like, I don't know if I could be unbiased with certain things that I have an emotional tie to.
No one's unbiased. No one is unbiased.
Some just hide it better?
Some hide it better ever since. So Elliot Mishler is a psychiatrist. He might still be alive. He was one of the pioneers in showing the American Medical Association that, hey, all of these trials that you think you're running and you think you're being unbiased, you're actually communicating the results that you want.
Yeah.
Without knowing it, you're telling the participants what results you want.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've had to develop some really advanced sort of ways to counter the fact that everyone is biased.
Yeah.
So we try to look at, like, I'm very excited and very involved in my Dorothy Sayers, Lord Peter Wimsey dissertation. You have to be excited about it for it to sustain you.
Right.
But you can't go into something going, I know I can get this outcome. It's like, even if you get the outcome, it's not replicable. It's not valid.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't that the whole point, is to find the solution that you can then do over and over again?
Find the solution that you can replicate and find the solution that other people can get reliably the same response.
Yeah.
That's really the goal.
But I just, and again, I thank you, because these are moments when my perspective shifts, because I was like, I really thought that, like, oh, these people who aren't biased at all must have something different than me, who's emotionally tied to a lot of things that have a good force. Like, I do this because the emotional tie to deep conversation and moving a good message forward, right? That's an emotional connection. And, related to PTSD, related to war, because my uncle, or, oh, you're good, hon. Or, just the idea that if jiu-jitsu was in schools, then maybe they'd find one of me who is in a tough spot, and then finally he doesn't have to go through it anymore. There's always something that I pick from, and I'm like, do you have no opinion on this at all? They're like, nope. I'm like, well, nice.
I think there's a huge difference, depending on who you're asking. There's a huge difference if you ask them, or if they're not saying anything, do you have an opinion? Well, yeah, I probably do. Do I have an educated opinion? Do I know enough of what I'm talking about to give an intelligent opinion here? No.
Yeah.
The vast majority of things I do not know enough about.
Now, again, if I ever go, like, we can edit all the time. So if I ever say something or, like, do something that's a prying question, just be like, Chase, cut that. I'll be like, okay, I'll cut that. But again, for me, the emotional tie to the improvement was, I'm seeing very negative things that combine with early childhood stuff that I've somehow blocked out. And now as an adult, I'm having to face them in full force, even though in my mind I can't really remember them. But thank goodness I had my sister who's like, no, mom and dad did that scenario, remember that? And then I go, I don't. Vaguely I do a little bit, and then kind of like unlocks it for me a little bit. And then I was getting little glimpses like that. And that was my driving force to improve. Is there anything related to that, like when you were 17 and you went to therapy or did this, that, because I've always wanted to have this thing where I want to talk to me. Like if I could go back and talk to me, you know, it's like, I would tell you this. And then I'm having to conflict with me. Like, I don't know if I would. Because I think maybe young Chase has to go through some of that stuff to be the Chase that can go back and tell him that thing. And I'm like, when it comes to jiu-jitsu in schools or finding that Chase that's being bullied, it's like it helps me in a way pull away from that. But I didn't know if there was anything specific that launched you into this field. Like Ray got into one community because of the foster care system and this and that, because you're a very educated, very dedicated person to this. And why, like, trauma and PTSD specific? If that's I don't know if I got too deep into that question, but.
If you got too deep into the question, a colleague and I have joked about, just because of the length and the intensity of analysis, we've joked about getting like softball jersey type shirts that just say, want to go longer and deeper? Get an analyst. You're not getting, there's no such thing as too deep a question for us.
That is 2 t-shirt ideas in one podcast. We are rolling.
Wait, say it in there. 2.
Oh, 2. So sorry. That's 2 of them.
So why trauma? It's something that, so if I have firsthand experience with 75% of adults have traumatic experiences. 25% of adults will develop PTSD at some point in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. For me, part of what got interesting with it, I had to get the whole process of addressing it. So going from this place of having no idea what happened and just knowing A, I have no idea what this thing is, but B, it is consuming every part of my existence right now.
Yeah.
Going from that to being able to go, so that's what was happening there. That seems a fairly straight line of sort of uncovering sort of self-awareness there and learning more of what you described, like remembering more childhood stuff.
Yeah.
But in order to get to that, a lot of what fascinated me was the process of getting there.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good.
You have to have the safety to get there. Traumatic events are what they are because we consider them to be life-threatening. Part of what messes with people so much is the event doesn't have to be objectively life-threatening. Not everyone has to agree that this endangered your life. It's a subjective experience of, I thought I was going to die. And so going from that, this experience that threatened our lives, we have to be able to get to a place that we feel, our minds feel safe enough to look at this thing without running the risk of dying again.
Yeah.
Without running the risk of getting back into it. And it's not something that we can consciously control.
Yeah.
There are scenarios where, you can go, okay, I know I am in a safe setting. And some part of your mind will go, yeah, but are you?
Right.
You can never really shut that voice out. And so you have to be able to get safe enough to be able to look at this thing. And then you mentioned kind of diving into stuff for yourself and going, oh shit, this is terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you never want to do this kind of thing without a tour guide.
Yeah.
Like it's actually the relationship that makes it safe. And when you start looking at that, it gets really, really nuanced. So for me as analyst, how do I be somebody that this person feels safe enough with, that they can talk to about things that they don't even want to acknowledge themselves? They don't know really anything about who I am as a person. So there isn't that reciprocity that usually builds relationships.
Yeah.
But I need to be safe enough that they can talk about this at their pace. I need to ask, I need to say or not say just at the right time. And how do I guide or suggest without pushing?
Yeah.
Very much unlike jiu-jitsu. Anything you get by force costs more than it's worth in therapy. Yep. So, I can invite, but I can't command.
Right.
And when you factor that in with what I said earlier about everybody's biased in unconsciously presenting the results that they want to see, a lot of times we don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah.
So something that does happen in long treatments is the patient will appear to get better by all the metrics you have, except that they don't actually think they're getting better. And what you can find if you know how to look for it is that they're giving you what they think you want. And neither of you is consciously aware of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. It's really hard to notice because it's not something that happens verbally.
Yeah.
It's implicit, so unspoken. It's a completely implicit thing. And if you aren't really, even if you're looking for it, it can be really hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know to look for it, it can just be endlessly confusing.
Yeah. And that a perfect analogy, not analogy, but situation that I can pull from is that I know someone who was like, from the past, who was really good at showing the improvement and showing that this trauma, this thing that happened to him as a kid isn't a real thing. And then as I got to, and I believed it for a while, but then after, that facade comes down and it kind of comes back out, then anger outbursts and stuff. I'm like, what happened to the other? And then you realize that it was all just, they were just really good at that. They were really good at like putting that on for me rather than actually showing improvement. And I'm like, oh no. It's like, cause being the emotional person, I was like, I really want to see you succeed. I want to see you beat this, combat it, just like I would, or I'm doing at the moment with you, and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit because you can attest to this, but if I was the person sitting like this, talking to someone who was going through it, and I'm like, we're doing so well in my head, yes, I really want you to have these dreams, this life, this thing that you want, and then come to realize, oh no, it wasn't actually working.
It wasn't what they wanted for themselves. They did what they thought you wanted rather than going with, hey, I want you to be able to do, something that works for you. It's tricky.
And there again, when it comes to the trauma and PTSD and different, so like if I could compare, like me and my sister are very, very open about just whatever. Mm-hmm. So if she has something and then she can fire back to me, there's no judgment. There's no this. It's like, this was a situation I remember when I was this age. I think maybe that could be something that I'm dealing with now as an adult, whether it be relationships or, in this case, it was like relationship stuff. And, not to, just paint over a generalization or make it a generalization, but, you assume that war and veterans in the war, like PTSD for sure. But then you also have stuff that aren't relative to war stuff that also are very serious PTSD stuff. Is that any part genetic? Like malleable in the brain, more susceptible to, and I didn't look up any studies. That was just always a question I've had, because also at the same time, if there was an answer, I think it's more reflective for me as a person and my character. Because if there was an answer, I'd feel better that I'd be like, well, maybe I won't get it. Maybe it won't happen to me if I really dive into that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I think that's where that question actually comes from. So, thank you. What's the hour rate?
I feel like I'm getting a free therapy session. We talked about it at the beginning. No one's getting paid for anything, but I did get a free therapy session, and I'm grateful for this right now. So thank you.
And like I said, that just hit me then that's why that question's there, because it's like there is a part of me that is like I'm actively digging deeper, but it's also like if me and my sister uncover something that I really don't remember, I'm like we're terrified.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You may not have quite been ready to remember that yet.
Yeah.
To answer your question about genetics, this is one of the really frustrating parts of mental health work in general. And it's one of the reasons that it's so easy to misuse. People want the answer. Mm-hmm. If we can't have, there's one answer to everything we want. Okay. There are like 2 or 3. Most of the time, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Or we don't know. And people are not really, we're not real good at sitting with the tension of not knowing.
Yeah.
The common answer to your question is there is a genetic predisposition to trauma in the same way that it's roughly analogous. Like if you have a genetic heart weakness that you don't know about, LeBron James's kid, when he had that heart attack, okay, they had no idea that he had that genetic heart issue. It only got brought out under the stress of basketball.
Right.
So if you have this genetic predisposition to this experience, we may not know it, but it takes a combination of the genetic predisposition and the environmental trigger without the support.
Yeah. Community is a big aspect in a lot of this stuff that I was looking up too.
Yeah. That's why when 75% of people get exposed to a traumatic event, but only 25% of those people develop PTSD, the biggest factor mitigating development of PTSD is community support. And so it becomes a lot less about, hey, do this thing or don't do this and you'll be fine, and becomes a whole lot more about soft place to land.
Yeah.
When you screw up or not get a scream at you for it, make mistakes, try it, you'll have a soft place to land. If we do that and we let people know that there is something behind them, that they're not just going to fall flat, it makes people feel a whole lot more free to look forward on what they want to do.
Absolutely. And that was also, again, when I was digging into all this, it was always just the community aspect was key. And I remember adding it at the end, and it was at the end of that sentence when it came to veterans. And it was like, it depends, right? Yeah. Is the answer. And I get it because, one, brain chemistry and genetics, it's complicated. I mean, the idea that it's so fascinating to me that we make people. Like, it's just crazy how much can go wrong. And, my kiddo was born like in the NICU for 5 months when he was born. It's like, and they knew about it when he was being born. Like, so it's like, there's really, it's so complex that it's, one, a factor because it's complicated. And then two, life in the environment is complicated and it's hard and it does suck. Right. And it's like, you do need that community part to, like, you have a soft place to land. I have someone that, like, Carly or my sister, right? It's like, if I talk about this, you're not going to, like, hate me or, like, look at me differently or do something. It's like, that's also huge.
Yeah.
I mean, if you, like, so even if you can, at least for me, even if I can go, life is supposed to be hard. It is hard. You can't change it. Okay? You can't change how we as people get made and how complex it is and how things can go wrong and wires can go here. They can be landed here, right? But I can control, like, well, for me, it was like my physical. I can control the consistency to doing something because I'm choosing to do that, right? And that's good for my self-confidence and then feeling like I'm supposed to be here on earth. And then being able to, in the moments when I don't feel like I should be here, being like, hey, I'm having a tough go right now. I don't know why. And it happened probably a month ago. And it was like, it's usually when, if I had to guess, it was like everything was kind of falling into place. Things were building and growing. And, now that the studio's growing and the team's growing, it's like everything's going great. And then it was like, part of me was like, maybe it's not supposed to. And then it was just like a week of just, I'm not doing anything. Work suffered. I barely talked to her. I couldn't talk to my sister. But then, they're persistent. And they were like, we support you regardless. And I'm like, I know.
Can't hide from me. I'll find you.
Or like, I've been in the bathtub just sitting there for like 2 hours. Water's not even warm. And my sister's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm just taking a bath. Just something small. I'm like, I forget that a lot. And to have that, probably pretty rapidly after that, I was like, I may not have, parents understanding, job understanding, but I do have these two people who get me. And that small little community saved me every day. They saved me every day. And so that aspect I thought was really, really important because there is a weird thing about us. We are, I always make the joke, but it's a serious thing the worst thing you can do to the worst criminals on the planet is put them by themselves.
Yeah.
You're going in the hole, right? You're like, you leave you alone in the dark for a while. You're like, we're these community codependent people who have their own identity, but we still need each other at the end of the day.
Yeah. Evolutionarily, we are wired to be social creatures. Our survival depends on it.
Yeah.
Compared to most of the other animals out there, the ones that we would consider threats, we are physically pathetic. It's our communication, our verbal ability, and our ability to work together and work in a social setting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what kept us alive.
Yeah. I mean, I watched that Chimp Kingdom or whatever it's called on Netflix, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they have their own little groups. They have their own little this. You know, they groom each other, and that's how they establish this hierarchy between everyone. I'm like, wow, we do that every day, just in different ways.
Yep.
And I was like, but we do it way, way better. And the other, obviously, complexity. And this is probably my last deep question.
Yeah.
But I found it very, and again, I can't validate the truth, and I can't validate for this person, but I was watching this podcast also. He had a PhD in something, but that sounds so terrible. But they asked him the question about like being sentient. Like, we're aware of a lot of stuff. We're aware of more than the chimps are outside of their own circle. For most of the things on this planet, we're the top dog. And he's like, if I had to take a guess, an educated guess, he's like, I think it's because we can look ahead. We can see that improvement, and they see right now. Mm-hmm. I can visualize something, picture it, consistently do actions every day, and see that going forward. And I think he called it basically the mind time machine. I can see myself 6 months from now being better at jujitsu than when I went the first time. He's like, and I started like doing regular things, and I'm like, oh, I do that. Okay, that's a good answer. That also adds to this whole complexity of life. Not only is it genetically and physically hard to make a person, and then some things might get crossed, but also you have the world out there. And then on top of that, we have the complexity of being conscious and sentient and aware of what you're doing. It's like, oh, okay. I needed immediately, as soon as I hit all three, I went like this. Well, better start fixing it because I got to live in this head. Only me. So I better repair and try and fix as best I can. And to have someone like you to explain things that are way beyond me, I feel like I've improved as a person by, one, meeting you the first time and just sitting where she's at and going like this. You have to come in here. We need like an hour and a half. So, yeah, I appreciate everything that you've come in here for, Breck. Do you have anything you want to add or close? Because,
I mean, I appreciate you having me on here. This is not something that I've done before. It's the
you're great at it.
Second podcast I've ever heard or seen or been part of. And man, I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, no problem. Is there I guess at the fundraiser. Ooh. Nope, there it goes. There goes the ADHD. There it goes. But also I have to use the toilet.
Oh, that'll happen.
Yeah, I was like, we need a break, hon? You need a break?
Yeah, I was going to get some animal crackers, but I was going to wait until we were done.
Animal crackers. Okay. You heard it first. She's upset that she's not being paid for it, and now she just wants animal crackers.
No, I got a free therapy session, so my payment has been subdued. I am good. We're good. Oh, I'm great.
All right, Breck, Carly, thank you guys.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
You guys are great. Bye.
It's time to unwind. Take a drive.